Before we get started, I just want to let you know that I've got a Patreon. If you like the kind of content that I'm creating and you want to support the channel, Patreon is literally the absolute best way that you can do that. The lowest tier is literally $2 a month, and even that makes a huge difference. If you want to become a patron, you can do that by clicking the link in the live chat or in the description below. Thank you. That said, let's get on with the video. So I used to be in a cult. I used to be in a New Age cult. I used to believe in crystals and energy and ascension for a minute and all that kind of stuff. And it's safe to say that my relationship with science and facts over the years has been iffy. There was a point in my life when I disparaged science altogether. I used to say things like all of reality is subjective and things like that. Look at me now, I'm sitting here as an atheist making videos using rationality and science to debunk the ideas that I used to believe, basically. Full disclosure before we get into this, I'm not an expert, I'm not a professional about any of this stuff. I've literally just done the research and I'm compiling it all and putting it into a more bite-sized format for you. I'm an interested and concerned party and I'm passionate about the subject matter. Where I'm not presenting consensus and science and personal experience here, I'm speculating, so I'd encourage you to look at my sources, check out where I got the information that I'm sharing with you and draw your own conclusions and maybe stick a comment below once you've had a read. When I was in a cult, nobody said, "You're in a cult," to me. I don't think that very many people knew that that's what it was. I didn't. And from the outside, unless you know what you're looking for, I don't think it's that easy to tell. Of course, there are ways to tell, and if you know how cults work, then you can spot it a mile off. When I was leaving the group that I'd been involved with, though I wasn't aware of that much information on the internet about it, other than what was created by the group. There was some, but not enough, and the critical information that was there was easy to just kind of dismiss as the words of a hater that just wanted to take the leader down. And that's a common way of thinking with cults, apostate, suppressive person, hater. And it doesn't end there. Generally speaking, members of cults are conditioned to ignore the words of ex-members and critics, so it can be really hard to get through to them. And the moment that you reveal that you don't think that they're one of God's chosen or that they have the secrets to the universe, then they're likely to withdraw and throw in with the group that much more. For me, nobody said, "You're in a cult," but it's an urge that we all have, I think, when we see someone who is joining up with a group and they start to act in an odd new way or talk in an odd new way. The implications of cognitive dissonance aside, there's a lot of science that would explain why that is the case and why someone might discount or ignore the assertions of someone who is presenting facts and science. And that's something that I want to talk about in the future, and when I do, I'll leave a link to that in the card above or in the description below. You'll be able to find it. It seems to me that a lot of the people that end up in cults in some way have some of their needs met by the cult environment, at least initially. It might be in an unhealthy, destructive way, but it seems that in some way, at least initially, the cult is doing something for the recruit. And by doing something, I mean something emotionally, something psychologically, not necessarily physically. Maybe for some, a cult helps people feel like they matter, and for others it might make them feel like they belong somewhere. And in certain psychologically focused cults, it might be that the people in the group are under the impression that the teachings, the techniques of the leader are more effective than that of conventional therapy. And if undue influence isn't established already at that point, then that initial promise and transaction will lead to undue influence. In the research that I've done, it seems like basically anyone can end up in a cult. It just depends on the kind of group that we're looking at. According to Stephen Hassan, many people have a hard time believing that bright, talented people, often from good homes and with higher education, could fall under the control of a cult. What they fail to realize is that cults intentionally recruit valuable people. They go after those who are intelligent, caring, and motivated. Most cults do not want to be burdened by unintelligent people with serious emotional or physical problems. There are exceptions to that, of course, as Hassan said, most cults. Some of them do target vulnerable people deliberately. I would add that in groups where the leader is narcissistic, you're also looking at the caring nature of the recruit being exploited in some way. the relationships between narcissists and their scapegoats and flying monkeys is well documented. And a cult with a narcissist at the top looks a lot like a relationship with a narcissist one-to-one when you zoom in on the interpersonal dynamics. And in cults where vulnerable people are targeted, we're looking at the possibility that a cult may provide a mask for the loneliness. The cult member may find in the cult a mask for their feeling of loneliness, or it may provide them with an explanation for the horrible realities or difficult to handle realities that they experience in the world outside the cult. And it may even provide them with an escape from those realities. So to these people, when you reveal yourself as someone who thinks that their new family or community or tribe is a cult, then you're threatening their newfound safety. You might be seen as someone trying to take away the one-size-fits-all magic answer to all of their life's problems. In a lot of cases, cults are comparable to toxic one-to-one relationships, and where we can think of someone in an abusive relationship explaining away or even defending the behaviour and abuse of their abuser. The same can be said of a lot of cults as well. Cult members defending their leaders for the things that they are doing or encouraging them to do, which actually cause more harm than good. And as with a toxic one-to-one relationship, there's always another reason that it's being done. It's being done because they love them or they want to help them, and you see the same kind of thing in cults as well. As outsiders, we see the damage that's being done, but from the inside, people don't see it. In fact, in a lot of cases, the people on the inside are conditioned not to see it, or they don't notice it, or they look past it because of something that they have deemed to be worth it. And Stephen Hassan, who developed the bite model, has actually talked about how a relationship can actually fit the bite model too. So in terms of one-to-one personal relationships, they can be cult-like as well. A mistake that a lot of us make when we realise that someone's in a cult is like confronting them and just going up to them and just being like, you're in a cult. And I've made that mistake as well with people in my life personally, and maybe to some extent on this channel as well in the past. Obviously I have had people come to me and say that I've helped them get out of cults, which that's good. That's like, I'm really happy about that, but still, it's likely to make them shut down, and it's going to be harder for them to open to you about that in the future after that has happened. Maybe not impossible, but harder, I think. Another factor that plays into this whole whether they're going to realise they're in a cult, why they won't believe you when you say it's a cult thing, is that a person changes when they join a cult a lot of times. Their personality changes, the way that they see the world, the way that they talk changes, and that's as relevant when they're leaving the cult as when they're joining it, I think. Experts like Stephen Hassan talk about reuniting a former cult member with the person that they were before, in a way. Robert J. Lifton talks about doubling in his work with certain doctors in World War II, and I believe the concept is similar to ego splitting in psychoanalytics. Hassan talks about the creation of a second cult-appropriate identity as well. I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially the point, I think. And all of this, the doubling, the ego splitting, the cult-appropriate identity, all of that is around this same issue. This is something that happens with a lot of cult members. The regular, authentic personality is put on the back burner, and then this new cult-appropriate personality is brought forward. And even if the cult will call that new personality an authentic personality, it doesn't necessarily mean it is. What tends to happen is, the person that they are, the more authentic person that they are, is kind of pushed back and kept down, while a new personality predisposed towards survival in the group, predisposed towards pleasing the leader and upholding the leader's standards, or in a lot of cases, modelling the leader and becoming a clone of the leader, that is created, and that becomes the primary personality of the person. This obviously occurs more severely with the more dangerous and extremist groups. Look into Heaven's Gate and Jehovah's Witnesses and you'll see it. And it occurs to a lesser extent with online cults. I say lesser, but that doesn't mean that the effects or the implications can be discounted. The process of returning to yourself after leaving a cult is a long and difficult one, and speaking from personal experience as well, I can say that it's confusing. But reconnecting with your old life is a huge part of that. Because it's such a complicated and drawn out process, it does need to be handled patiently and over time, as far as I'm aware. So yeah, obviously the whole "you're in a cult" thing is a bit more abrupt than that, and there's reasons why that's not going to land as well as you want it to necessarily. For me, the deprogramming part where I reconnected with myself and my old life happened during a month-long visit to see my family. And in that time, I was bombarded by all these old patterns and connections and relationships that I'd had before. And it kind of just brought me back to myself bit by bit. And in that time, I was away from the environment I'd created for myself, and I wasn't being inundated by all this new information or these cult teachings and other spiritual ideas that shut down and reconditioned my personality. I was able to reconnect with the part of me that I had, been all my life and that had grown with my body, if you like. Later on, it dawned on me that I had been in an online cult and that I was worse off for it. I had heard it called a cult a few times before that, but it just kind of went in one ear and out the other. And I think that speaks to how in cults, to cult members, facts are kind of optional and proof is so-so. Facts are optional, proof is personal and anecdotal usually. And that's one of the main reasons I think that most people don't realise that they're actually in a cult. I mean, no one enters a cult knowing it's a cult. No one goes into a cult willingly. I suppose, generally speaking, maybe some people do. But the process of establishing undue influence, the process of indoctrination is slow. It's steady. It's like the frog boiling in the water slowly. Because no one joins a cult deliberately, the realization that they're in one is going to be shocking. It's going to be painful, incredibly unpleasant. So it's something that needs to be handled gently. And the fact that they disregard facts and things that are considered mainstream and not the truth, or bad or wrong even in some cases, or material out to discredit the organization or to make the leader look bad or take them down, that just kind of exacerbates things. And I think the disregard for the acceptance of established facts is like its whole own thing. It's a whole other topic. But what makes all this all the more fascinating is that when unsafe leaders respond to the idea that what they're doing is running a cult with outdated models and straw man ideas, you always see people, as I said before, whenever people talk about cults, you always hear people saying like, oh, there's no consequences for leaving and blah, blah, blah. And that is like the tip of the iceberg when we're looking at what defines a cult. And I have so many people in my comments and stuff saying, oh, you need to look up what a cult is. It's like, do you think I'd sit here and make just spat then? Do you think I'd sit here and make YouTube videos if I didn't know what a cult was, if I hadn't done the research and really come upon what I consider to be indisputable evidence of the fact that what I used to be in was a cult, Why would anyone sit and do that? I mean, obviously some people are going to sit and do that. Unsafe leaders, which I've seen 2 in the last week that have... Netflix did a thing about cult leaders and cults and stuff, and 2 unsafe leaders who were featured in that have made videos basically strawmanning what a cult is using the what's the word etymology of the word cult to try and discount it. And if you're going to try and discredit the idea that you're running a cult, then at least use an up-to-date model. And to be fair, you'll find it a lot harder to do that then. Probably why the outdated model was used. But this does go a long way to explaining why a lot of cult members disregard established facts, I think. If the leader's doing it and the people are becoming a clone of that leader, then they're going to do it too. As I mentioned earlier, with cults, they do tend to provide what feels like a refuge, a safe haven from the realities of the outside world. The behaviour, thinking and emotional states of people inside these groups tends to be conditioned in a way that results in a childlike state. Because of this, trying to use rationality to philosophise someone out of a cult can be tedious at best and oftentimes unsuccessful. If they don't have an answer for everything, and most cult members do, you're going to come up against a wall of cognitive dissonance sooner or later. And the rational approach of a person outside a cult can often be lost on someone inside a cult. I've had a lot of discussions with a number of different cult members, and what I always find is that they're pretty quick to resort to fallacious defences and cult lingo and conditioned responses and changing the goalposts, which is always frustrating. Fallacies and fallacious defenses, that's its own topic, I think, and I want to talk about that in the future as well. But add to that the fact that most cult members believe that they have the like literal ultimate truth, and what you get is like this really baffling, condescending, childlike reasoning that doesn't hold up, and it certainly doesn't convince anyone on the outside. There's a thing that Jonna tagged me in actually that talks about how that kind of a rhetoric actually does more to solidify the tribalism of the in-group rather than actually convince anyone in the out-group, and people not understanding them, them feeling persecuted by the responses of people only actually increases the glue, if you like, between the members there and the person's certainty that they have the ultimate truth. It's a really strange thing. When I say childlike here, I'm not actually saying that to offend anyone. I was there and I did that too. I was at that place where my reasoning was facile, it was childlike. So I'm not trying to upset anyone when I say that. For me, on the inside, I'd found the answer to everything, but on the outside, I was this kind of empty smile clone of the leader who just gave facile answers. And sometimes I was probably close to actually being able to say things that were useful or grounded, but generally I think I had my head in the clouds or somewhere significantly darker. When all's said and done, if you can't just outright tell someone they're in a cult and have them go, oh yeah, you're right, maybe I am in a cult, and you're also contending with this whole other cult personality, then it starts to look like your options are dwindling a little bit. Thankfully, Hassan has written a whole book on helping people get out of cults, and it's something that I want to research more in the future. He's developed the strategic interactive approach, which helps people overcome undue influence and get out of destructive environments, and I think that's something that we could all do with being aware of. I'm definitely going to be getting that book and reading it. All the stuff that you've heard here is from talks he's given, so all of it's available on the internet, and as I say, anything that I can remember that I'm referencing from a specific place, I'm going to include in the links below this video. Otherwise, I just recommend you just literally search for Stephen Hassan and just look for anything that he's done, talks he's done, things with Robert J. Lifton. It's really interesting and worth being aware of. I'm not the expert here, and that's really important to be clear about. Stephen Hassan is, Robert J. Lifton is, Margaret Singer was. These are people that know what they're talking about. I'm just taking what they've said, condensing it into a video and giving it to you with my face as well. That said, if you know someone that's in a destructive or dangerous environment, then as well as researching this stuff, it might be worth speaking to the authorities about that. But if you're talking to someone, if you're dealing with someone or one of your loved ones is in a relatively safe but destructive environment, something that's not dangerous, then go in slowly, doing a bit of research on this and opening up dialogue with them that doesn't put their back up and make them feel like they need to go on the defensive. That's going to make a real difference. Something I've heard Hassan say actually is that if you research other cults and learn about what other cults do, and then you talk to the person about what the other cults do that's similar to what their cult does, without making that comparison in an overt way and saying this is a cult so that's a cult, you just talk to them about what these other cults do and what this other cult leader does, and kind of give them the space to reason that out on their own. That will make a difference. It's about kind of generally highlighting the similarities and then just kind of letting them mull that over, I think. In street epistemology, one of the things that they say is that kind of space, like you ask the question and then you just let them think and muddle it out, and it starts to reveal how they've got to that conclusion. I know that street epistemology isn't necessarily a tool for convincing people of your point of view, but the same thing's true in there. That moment of reflection, I think, is really important. You can say things like, oh, I've heard about such and such a leader saying that they're the reincarnation of Da Vinci or Imhotep or something like that. I thought that was really interesting. That might be relevant if the person's cult leader says that they're the reincarnation of Shirdi Sai Baba, for example, like that. You kind of can see there's a similarity between the two groups there, and it starts to look like it's maybe fitting a model more than it being the absolute truth. Or you can say, I heard about X that says they have superpowers or can move mountains with their mind or something. If the person's leader is, saying that they have extrasensory abilities and that they don't see negative space and those kinds of things, that you can draw the comparison and then you can let them notice that there is a similarity between the two. But as I say, giving them that space to kind of just discern it for themselves is really important. That discernment is something that tends to get lost for people who are in cults. Again, I'll speak, hair in my mouth. I can speak from personal experience on that particular point and say that when I was in the cult, my capacity for reasoning wasn't what it is now. My capacity for discernment wasn't what it is now. A lot of times I'd say, I'm not taking any of this on face value. I'm testing this all out. I'm trying this all out. I'm not going to believe anything until I'm sure it's real. But I had already come to believe it, and I wasn't testing it out. I was just telling myself that. So there was that kind of incongruency there. Whereas now I'm practicing, because I feel like discernment and like rationality is like a muscle, and you've got to build it up. You've got to like practice, and then you get better at it. And when you're in a cult, when you're in a destructive or unsafe group, that capacity for discernment tends to be squashed. And it happens in both covert and overt ways as well. Sometimes it is literally conditioned out of people. Other times there's that incongruency of someone will say, you need to think for yourself, and then they'll tell you what the ultimate truth is, and they'll tell you that they've got superpowers, so you're going to be more inclined to listen to them. There's lots of different ways that happens. But generally that discernment does get squashed in people. So just encouraging that when you're talking to them, I think does make a difference. It's going to help them to start to think more independently again. But whatever your approach, please don't forget compassion and empathy. It's understandable that you're going to get annoyed. I get annoyed when I'm talking to people sometimes, and they say things and you're like, why are you saying that? Like, that's just awful, or it's obviously not true, or it just is, as I say, facile. It just misses the point, For me, it's what's really made a difference. What made a difference for me when I was coming out, and also what makes a difference when I'm talking to people, I notice, is that it's compassion, it's empathy that really gets through to people. If you're not putting their back up, that helps you get through to them and helps them meet you halfway, at least sometimes. And if you want to help someone get out of a cult and, they're not in a violent or immediately destructive situation, something like the Jehovah's Witnesses, for example, or the Mormons or something like that, get comfortable with being patient. It's going to take time. These things do take time. It's a slow and gradual process getting into it, and up until the point where perhaps they just have that realization, like, oh, I'm in a cult. Then it's slow, it's steady, it's just gently guiding them towards established fact, I hope that you got something from this video, and I didn't come across too like, snot-nosed and like, these are the facts, listen to me, because that's not my intention. If you want to get in touch with me personally, you can do that through my Twitter or my other social media. The links for that are below in the description, along with my Patreon. As I mentioned at the beginning, if you want to support the channel, if you like the kind of thing that I'm doing, then Patreon is the best way that you can do that, and I'm grateful for anybody that is willing to support the channel in that way. While we're on Patreon, let me just say a massive thank you once again to my first patron, Manau. Manau, thank you again. As I always say, you're a star, and I'm really grateful for your support. Otherwise, if you like what I'm doing and you want to see more, then please hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe and whack the little bell as well, so that you get notifications for what I'm doing. If you'd like to get access to resources on cults and undue influence, I'm compiling a list which is growing all the time. You can get access to that by joining my Discord or my Facebook group. Again, links are in the description below. On that note, I want to say a massive thank you for watching, and I will bid you farewell for the minute, unless you want to see more videos and you stick around and watch more, in which case I will see you in the next one.